Hey guys, welcome back to The Mind of Brandon, and welcome back to some more discussion of Zeitgeist. So, to recap, in the first part of this series, we established that regardless of what debunkers were saying, Zeitgeist is actually right about the Egyptian god Horus being a sun god. Then, in the second part, we determined that regardless of what debunkers are saying, Zeitgeist is actually right about Horus having a birthday associated with December 25th. Then in the third part, we determined that regardless of what debunkers are saying, Zeitgeist is actually right about Horus being born of the Virgin Isis Mary. But this, of course, doesn't mean that Zeitgeist is right about everything. So we will continue looking at Zeitgeist's claims, seeing what the debunkers have to say about them, and then figuring out who's right and, well, who's wrong.
His birth was accompanied by a star in the east, which, in turn, 3 kings followed to locate and adorn the newborn Savior.
So in the story of Horus, there is no star in the east. There's another fabricated lie, and he was not adorned by 3 kings upon his birth.
Dude, I know this is just going to shock the hell out of a lot of Zeitgeist debunkers, but it does turn out that ancient Egypt did have more than one story. If you don't believe me, then you should check out this book on the literature of ancient Egypt. There's a bunch of different stories in here. The very first story is one called King Cheops and the Magicians, which actually has a nativity scene in it that has some interesting parallels to the biblical nativity scene. That being said, our Egyptian nativity scene does have 3 kings. There's some gift giving. Isis is there, and we should make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that Isis is associated with the star Sirius. Sirius is also known as Sothis. But anyway, in this Egyptian story, it's actually the 3 kings who are being born. They're the ones who are going to be presented with gifts. This does not mean that Horus is not born in this story. Actually, in Egypt, there's this tradition where the king is considered to be an incarnation of Horus. Now, that does not mean that the king is the totality of Horus's existence. The king is a form that Horus takes. Another one would be the sun god Re. Re is Horus of the horizon. That being said, these 3 kings are referred to in this story as sons of Re. This is another tradition in ancient Egypt, the idea that the pharaoh is son of the sun god Re. The individual who's giving birth to them is a priestess of Re. So what's Isis's role in all this? Well, she's the one who is delivering the 3 kings. And you'd think that this would mean, she'd be sitting there talking to the mother, push, push, But no, instead she's actually talking to the children who are in the mother's womb. She's giving them instructions. And so these 3 kings inside the womb of their mother, they follow Isis. They follow her instructions, right? And so they start popping out one at a time. Now, once the 3 kings are born, Isis and the 3 goddesses that are with her perform acts of magicianry. They magically bring about these gifts to bestow upon these children, things like crowns, stuff like that. But since the 3 kings are forms that Horus is taking, you can kind of look at it as though Horus is the one receiving those gifts via the 3 kings. But you don't need to have an astrotheological interpretation of the story of King Cheops and the Magicians to be able to put in perspective that the birth of Horus was associated with the 3 king stars in Orion's belt and the star Sirius, which of course is the star that Zeitgeist is referring to as the star in the east. In the words of Egyptologist Dr. John Gwynne Griffiths, Sothis was the harbinger of the annual inundation of the Nile through her appearance with the rising sun at the time when the inundation was due to begin. The bright star would therefore naturally become, together with the conjoined constellation of Orion, the sign and symbol of new vegetation which the year then beginning would infallibly bring with it. And, in the words of Egyptologist James Allen, the morning star, Sirius, seen by the Egyptians as a goddess. In Egypt, the star disappears below the horizon once a year for a period of some 70 days. Its reappearance in midsummer marked the beginning of the annual inundation and the Egyptian year. The star's rising was also seen as a harbinger of the sunrise and therefore associated with Horus in his solar aspect, occasionally specified as Horus and Sothis, Sothic Horus, or Sharp Horus. And according to the Egyptologist Siegfried Schott, the Egyptian New Year actually opened with a birthday for a version of Horus called Ra Harakti. Let's keep in mind, though, that there were other versions of Horus that had birthdays at other times. Just a few days prior to Ra Harakti, Horus the Elder had a birthday, and of course, Harpocrates has a birthday around the time of the winter solstice. And let's not forget, there's also the concept that the sun is reborn on a daily basis. So, once again, Zeitgeist is right. Horus did have a birthday associated with a star in the east, Sirius, as well as three kings, the three king stars in Orion's belt.
And there is no mention of there being three kings at the birth of Jesus. It talks about there's wise men that are present, but never three kings. And even the wise men, there's no number of wise men. It just says there were wise men that were present at the birth of Jesus. So they're trying to compare Horus with the Christmas story of Jesus, and even then they're failing to do so because they're throwing a lot of fabricated lies at you.
Okay, once again, you're losing sight of the fact that we're talking about the origins of Christian tradition. There are certain aspects of Christian tradition that have been just kind of handed down from pagan tradition. That does include some of what's in the Bible, okay? But it's not exclusive to what's in the Bible. There's Christian tradition outside the Bible. You need to keep in mind that the Bible is itself, at least in its current form, with both Old Testament and New Testament, that is a product of Christian tradition, not the other way around. Some people are confused about that. They think that Christianity is a product of the Bible when it's actually the other way around. Christianity predates the Bible. Christianity is what brought us the Bible in its present form. And it is Christian tradition that's responsible for associating the Magi with three kings. In fact, it's Christians who originally looked up at the three king stars in Orion's belt and said, hey, it's the Magi! That being said, I'm not going to address all the parallels that are being disputed by debunkers. I mainly just wanted to focus on the ones that I view to be most important. So let's go ahead and skip ahead a bit.
Horus had 12 disciples he traveled about with.
There were no 12 disciples. That's also a lie.
Oh, really? Well, there's Horus enthroned before 12 disciples. Or at least 12 figures representing the 12 hours of the day. Not to be confused with the 12 hours of night. Calling them disciples might be a bit of an exaggeration. And that is something that Zeitgeist does sometimes. And this is a point I really want to bring home, because I'm not doing this series to say that Zeitgeist is right about everything, right? It's not, okay? There is some stuff it's wrong about. But, you know, debunkers, they're acting like every single parallel it points out is just a blatant frickin' lie, right? And that's just not true, okay? A lot of this stuff, you know, a lot of the parallels it points out, well, it's right. Sometimes, though, when it's pointing out a parallel, it blows the parallel out of proportion. It makes it seem even more like something from Christian tradition than, you know, is actually the case. Now, what a lot of you have been waiting for, which you probably really want to know, is, you know, is there any validity to this stuff about Horus being crucified and resurrected? And, well, if you want to find out, then you're just going to have to watch my next video. So, to be continued, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it with other people. If you're interested in watching my future videos, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And I will see you all in the next one. So have a good one, guys, and peace.